On the news and in social media, public outrage, emotional pain, and widespread protest in the United States and around the world was sparked by the video footage of George Perry Floyd, an African-American man who on May 25th, 2020 was killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Handcuffed and lying on the street as a white American police officer, Derek Chauvin, pressed his knee onto Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, even as Floyd became unresponsive and despite his haunting last words, "I can't breathe," he died. Chauvin's usage of his knee-to-neck technique was widely criticized by law enforcement officers as excessive. Ironically, the name Chauvin is French for chauvinist. Today, I have with me my former high school classmate and the sister of Botham Jean. In 2018, Alicia's younger brother, Botham Jean, who had been a Harding University alumni and an accountant for PricewaterhouseCoopers, was in his apartment when a white female officer, Amber Guyger, walked in and shot him. According to Wikipedia, Amber testified that she thought the apartment was her own and that she had found the door slightly ajar. She thought Botham was an intruder in the darkened living room of her apartment. In fact, he was in his own apartment. She claimed that she feared Jean would kill her. Jean was unarmed. She was sentenced with murder and will only serve 10 years. Thank you, Allisa, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I know that this is still a very sensitive topic for you and your family, very difficult, emotional time to deal with, even 2 years later, and everything that you have had to go through even after the death of your brother.
Right.
Allisa, you have lived through firsthand how the system that is designed to serve and protect is unbalanced and downright unjust. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about your brother, Botham Jean? Because I think a lot of times people think this only happens to certain people. Who was he and what was his aspirations?
Well, Botham is from St. Lucia, just like you and me. He was always just this happy, vibrant, fun-loving person. He attended Carmen Rennie, then he went to St. Mary's College. Yeah. He had in his mind that he wanted more for himself, and he always wanted to be an accountant. So when offered the opportunity to go to Harding University, which is a Christian university, because we were all Christians, we were raised Christian. I always say that we were born and raised in a church. Yeah. He decided to go to Harding because it had that Christian association. He graduated with a double major and was offered a permanent job at PwC after doing an internship with them. Wow. When he moved to Dallas, I would say he loved Dallas. He loved the big city. He even tried to convince me to move out there with him. Yeah. But Botham, I spoke to him almost every single day. And up to the last day that he was on Earth, we spoke and he was happy to go home and eat ice cream and watch football. Botham was just always a happy person.
Wow. Wow. So you actually spoke with him the day that everything happened?
Yes, I spoke to him up until he walked into the apartment and he told me he was home and we hung up the phone.
Wow. So when you heard the news hours later that your brother had been killed in his apartment, how did you respond to that?
I was asleep when I received the call. I was listed as next of kin for him. So the hospital called me. It was around 12:29 a.m. And I found it strange that a 214 area code number was calling. In my mind, I thought it cannot be good. But when I answered the phone, I was preparing to hear about a car accident. I started looking around the room to pinpoint where my suitcase was, where my shoes were, where my clothes, what clothes I would put in, so that I could go to Dallas and be with my brother to help him out. But then the caseworker, she started asking me, do I know Botham Jean? Where does he live? What is his date of birth? Where does he work? And I answered all her questions, and then I said, what happened? Where's my brother? And she said he was brought in to the emergency room with a gunshot wound. That kind of threw me back because, again, I was expecting car accident. So I said, where was he shot? She said she doesn't know the details. He was found in his apartment, and he was shot the upper left part of his body. And then I said, and she started going into technical terms, and I said, is he alive? And she said, I'm sorry to have to tell you, he succumbed to his injuries.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And you would be the one to have to let the rest of the family know.
Yes, my mom was at my house in New York at the time.
Yeah.
So I had to go and break the news to her. My first thought was to tell her in the morning, just give her that one last night of rest. But then I thought, I have sons of my own. I wouldn't want information like that to be held from me.
Yeah.
So I went and I told her, and then I had to call his dad. I had to call my aunt, my cousins, and inform the family.
Wow. And so obviously this wasn't the news you were expecting. This is the last thing on earth that you think could possibly happen. Because you spoke with him earlier, he was getting into his apartment. So obviously things are going to be fine. Can you tell us, because listening to the case and following, even the trial on TV, I personally had questions like, were the apartments so similar that the police officer who walked in and thought it was her apartment, like, is that mistake actually possible? Was it something that could have actually happened by mistake?
I would say that if we were talking about a civilian, you, myself, I would say maybe. But for a police officer who is trained to know her surroundings at all times, and who's supposed to be investigating certain situations, you're supposed to be just always aware.
Yes.
So I know for a police officer, that is not a mistake that any police officer should make.
Yeah. Yeah. And so do you think that was there something that would have caused her to want to do this intentionally?
That I don't know. That's a question she could answer. But I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how challenging was it when everything happened to ensure justice for your brother? Because obviously you're dealing with the system, and as we're seeing on the news in America, that is quite unbalanced when it comes to dealing with particularly African Americans, with police officers, particularly white police officers. So what was the journey like to find justice for both of them?
In the beginning, it was, I would say it was a bit challenging, especially that I lived in New York and this happened in Dallas. My mom lives in St. Lucia. And especially dealing with a system that protects their own. Immediately the story started coming out with any case of police brutality, there's always a narrative that the victim was to blame for their own death. So that started. We met with the Texas Rangers because they're supposed to be the independent agency to take over the case. And we met with him that Saturday, and immediately he said, "Oh, this was just a big accident. It wasn't intentional. It was just a horrible mistake." And that was 2 days after my brother died. He already made up his mind that it was just a horrible accident.
Wow.
We met with the DA's office. We met with the prosecutors. Thankfully, we hired our civil attorneys who fought hard and demanded meetings, demanded transparency to the family on the progress of the case. But up until the trial, for those who watched the trial, Texas Ranger Armstrong still tried to testify that Amber Guyger was not at fault. So from the start to the end, that was he already made up his mind. Thank God the judge didn't allow his testimony, but he investigated the case to free Amber Guyger.
Wow. And so there was already, as you're saying, there was already a conclusion to the case. 2 days later, there was no investigation. It was just concluded that this was a mistake.
Right.
And so it really took your family taking things a step further with a civil attorney who could now put the pressure necessary to have them really create an investigation, because they wouldn't have done it.
Exactly, because we're dealing with most of the prosecution team being white, being ex-police officers. So it's the entire system, the way I see it, is kind of designed to save the police officer and not really the victim.
Yeah. And so in the end, she got a 10-year sentence.
Right.
How did that make your family feel?
When I heard, when the judge read the sentencing and she mentioned 10 years, I felt like I felt the same feeling of burying my brother. And I would tell you, burying my brother was one of the hardest days of my life.
Yeah.
To have to see them lower him into that dark hole and cover him up and to walk away from him. And I will tell you, Botham was afraid of cemeteries. Ever since he was a little boy, if we drove past the cemetery, he would turn his head because he didn't want to see it.
Wow.
And to leave my brother there was one of the hardest things I've had to do. So that 10-year sentence brought me right back to that.
Wow. And so is there any opportunity to get real justice, to get the sentencing or the sort of, because 10 years is a slap in the face for what happened.
Right.
Was there any other recourse for your family? Is there any other recourse?
No. I mean, we do have a civil case against the city of Dallas. But when it comes to the criminal part of it, that 10 years is it. I know for sure, I could guarantee that when parole comes up in 5 years, I will be there to demand that she spends her entire sentence locked up.
Yeah. So she got it with parole, which is quite interesting. So why do you think officers like Amber and even Derek Chauvin are so quick to mortally, because obviously she could have come into the apartment, maybe taser him, maybe even ask a question or something, right? Why are they so quick when they encounter particular African Americans to either shoot or to take action that mortally wounds them?
I've said it before, the way I see it is sometimes not just police officers, but white people look at the color of our skin as a weapon. It's like they see Black and it's danger. They associate us with everything negative. Just like recently, there was a case in New York where this man just simply walking in Central Park and asked a white female with a dog to put a leash on her dog because there was a sign saying that exact thing. And she
Yes.
decided to call 911 and, you know, scream like she's in danger.
Yeah.
So they look at us as just a threat. And they shouldn't see us that way because I don't look at them as a threat.
Yeah. And especially officers who are supposed to protect all people. What do you think can change about, because obviously there are people like this in the system, and cases like your brother and even George has come up and has been in the public eye, but there's so much that has happened that we are not seeing. So much that has possibly happened that have been swept under the carpet or framed as someone who was being dangerous and the officer needed to protect themselves. How do we ensure that the system, that the people who are put in a position to protect citizens are actually people who are mentally of sound mind mentally and will actually do the job? Because it's one thing if a civilian does it, but a police officer, when we even watched that video, I think, you know, I was saying to someone, one of the sad things I thought about your brother's case compared to George is that we actually had a video footage to see what went down. Like we saw it with our plain eyes. And so many people might say it's different, but I say if we had a video and we could actually see what happened, we would see exactly what went down, and probably it was exactly the same situation. We don't know, but you know, how do we ensure that these people who are filled with hate, who are filled with preconceived notions of one citizen versus another, how do we ensure that these people are not in the system?
See, our system, I don't know, for some reason, when a police officer applies for the job, I look at it, it starts from there. There should be a thorough background check, because there are instances where police officers are fired from the force in one state and they move to another state, apply and get hired. So that shouldn't be. To me, it should be once you're fired, you could never re-enter the force. As well as with the training, situation trainings, like if there is a Black person holding grocery bags and a white person holding a gun, which one do you shoot? Just situations to train their minds to look for the actual threat and not the person, not the color of the person's skin. I know for myself, I'm working with attorneys on federal legislation to change the law, because right now the law is designed for the police officer to get off. Because the minute they say that I felt threatened, then that's their ticket out of jail.
Wow. So just these words, I felt threatened. It's like they can take action on a feeling and not on what's in front of them, the facts in front of them.
Because they're trained to eliminate the threats.
Okay. Got it. Well, this is quite interesting because it's surprising that the law would actually just have that as a criteria, that if I feel threatened, whether or not someone is armed or whether the situation calls for that type of brute force, that I can take an action, take someone's life, and I will be fine. I'm protected by that. And that's what Amber used. Like she used that, knowing that there is this protection
that I feared for my life. Yes.
That I feared for my life. She used it, even knowing that maybe that was not true, because if he was having in his home watching TV or having ice cream or whatever he was doing at the time, there is no evidence of a threat. And I think, is that what you're working on, that there must be something in place to show an evidence of a threat?
Well, we're working on a few different things. It's that use of deadly force. We're actually trying to get a special task force to investigate these police involved shootings, like on an FBI standard, on a federal standard, not just local. Because if
Right.
you think about it, the same officers that the killer mingled with on a daily basis, these are the same officers that now have to go investigate their coworker. And of course, they
Yes.
will investigate it to get him off and not to see justice. So
That
we get that away from their hands and on a federal level.
that makes sense because obviously it's a colleague and you want to protect your colleague because there's an internal code.
Right.
Wow. And so obviously with cases like your brother's, with Botham's case, it brings to question the policies on guns in general in America. What are your views on the gun policies and what needs to change?
Honestly, with the gun policies, it has its own color as well. When Botham was killed, the NRA came out and put out a statement saying, well, if he had a gun, then he would still be alive. If he was a licensed gun owner. Yet still, there are cases like Philando Castile, who was a licensed gun owner and was shot in his car, just a routine traffic stop by a police officer, just by him saying that, I do have a licensed gun on me. He was shot. There's the case with Breonna Taylor, that took place a few months ago. Her boyfriend was a licensed gun owner, used his gun because the cops came barging in with a no-knock warrant. He fired his gun and he was arrested and charged with attempted murder on a police officer for firing his legal firearm.
Right.
So that even the gun laws are color-coded as well.
And I suppose if your brother had a gun, it would have made his case even worse because now he would have been armed.
Exactly.
And so the system is failing its citizen. And right now, there's a lot of, I think things are coming to a head. And I know that you've started a new movement called Sisters of the Movement. Can you just tell us a little bit about this movement? What do you hope to achieve with this organization?
So Sisters of the Movement was started when Botham was killed. A few sisters of police brutality victims reached out to me, Victoria Davis, Natasha Duncan. And it to me, it was therapeutic to be able to speak to persons who have been in my position, who have lost their siblings to that same issue. Because sometimes you speak to friends and they say, oh, yes, I understand, but they really don't get it.
Yeah.
So it felt good to have other sisters in my same position. And then we reached out to other sisters. So now we have a total of 8 sisters of police brutality victims. We meet every other Thursday. And in the beginning, we just did it, like I said, just as a form of therapy for us. Yeah. And then with Ahmaud Arbery, with Breonna Taylor, and with George Floyd, with all the new cases just all together in the span of 2 months.
Yes.
We decided to just launch our Sisters of the Movement, to reach out to other sisters, but our main purpose is to change the law. So that's why, like I said, we're actually working on federal legislation right now, with bullet points that affected each of our cases that should change. So we're really working hard to have this change. And I don't know how long it will take, and I don't care how long it will take, but we will get it done, because that is our goal. I have Black boys that I'm raising, and I don't want to see them in that position. I don't want to see anybody's child in that position again. So we will fight for it.
Yeah. So it's 8 of you and you're working towards changing legislation. Is there any way that the public can support what you're doing? Because obviously, I think if there's a lot of public pressure and support in making sure that these laws change, it will happen. How can the public join the movement and help you with making this happen?
So right now we're working on some action steps for the public, because once we launched, we got a lot of feedback, a lot of people reaching out saying, how can I join? So we will have action steps for the public coming hopefully next week. It will be on our website, sistersofthemovement.org. You can follow us, but we will definitely have action steps for everyone coming next week.
Okay. And the organization, your organization has some support by other organizations as well?
Yes, we have support from Rock Nation, Lee Merritt. He's one of the civil rights attorneys on almost every case.
Right.
From. We have their support, and we're all working together because it shouldn't be just one person's fight. I think it should be a fight for our entire race, because it's basically we're fighting to breathe. So I think everyone should join in that fight.
Absolutely. So there are people out there who are frustrated. No one can actually be as frustrated as you or any other family member of someone who has actually been affected by police brutality. But of course, there are people who are out there who are frustrated about this, who fear for their life, who, like you, have young sons or young daughters, and who really want to see things change. How can they make a difference?
I would say it starts with, not where it starts, but a part of it would be you vote. Get to know everyone on that ticket and vote. We have this year, we have a presidential election.
Yeah.
We have President Trump and we have Joe Biden. Yeah. For the time that President Trump has been the president for the United States, a lot of racism has come to the forefront. I think a lot of people who probably held their feelings or try to hide who they really are, they because of him, they're letting it out, they're unleashing it. So we need to vote. We need to bring someone to the polling station. We need to educate each other. And it's not just when it's a presidential election, it's for all the local elections as well. Because you're voting for judges and city council and all of that. So all of that makes a difference. So educate yourself, vote, bring as many people as you can with you. There's always a petition for certain things. I know petitions worked well for Ahmaud Arbery's case and George Floyd. There are petitions going around. If you feel like you cannot go out there and protest, you sign a petition, you do something, you educate your coworkers, your friends. But one thing I think for 2020, I just felt like I'm not gonna be silenced anymore.
Yes.
And neither should you.
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of people are feeling that the time for silence is not now. It's time to speak up. It's time to really be present, because those who are doing evil are not afraid to be present. They're out there. They're vocal. They're telling us how they feel, a lot of them. And I think good people need to step up. Exactly. I know that a lot of Caucasian people, white people in America right now, especially those who are good people, those who are genuinely, people who have always lived maybe from a space of inclusion, they're not racist in any way, but they feel that sense of guilt and shame because obviously by the color of their skin, they might feel a bit uncomfortable. What can they do to make a difference? What can they say at this time? Because I see this question a lot on social media, that people are saying they don't know what to do or say.
Right. I understand. I know for recently, especially with all the current events, I've noticed a lot of my white friends on social media, they've been sharing the stories. They've been putting out their own statements saying, that this was wrong. I saw it a lot with Ahmaud Arbery. I saw it a lot with Botham because Botham went to Harding and it was a white school.
Yes.
But I saw his friends speaking out and they're still doing it now. And when I see one of them post a statement, I share it. So with all the white friends, and I don't think that all white people are racist. So for the white people, you could share, you could comment, you could educate others on your timeline or in your circle, or sometimes even in your own family. But you can be against what's going on, but don't keep it to yourself. Don't be silent. You say something, you share it, and you educate everyone around you, because it's, yes, Black people can go out there and fight for ourselves, but imagine if we have all races standing together and fighting against this police brutality situation. Don't you think we will win?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is really a time for us to come together and to all just take a stand for justice and take a stand for this ending now.
Right.
Do you think that it can ever end, Allisa? I mean, it really seems like it's something that's so embedded in the fabric of the American culture. Can this actually change?
Police brutality? Yes.
Yeah.
I think it can. I think, but it starts with changing the law, because right now, like I said, the law is on the side of the police officer. But once that law is changed, once there is stricter penalty, I think every police officer will think twice before they just look at a Black man and assume that he's guilty for no reason just for walking the street. So once the law has changed, then I'm sure that police brutality will eventually get less and eventually just disappear. It will be a thing of the past. It will be a thing of history that our kids read about. But I pray on it every single day, the same way I prayed on Botham's Amber Guyger's trial. I prayed from day one for her to be found guilty, and she was. So I believe that we will see a change.
Yeah. And just another question, because as a family member of someone who has lost their life way too soon at the hands of a police officer, what should people not be saying on social media at this time? Because I think a lot of times, I've seen some things, in some situations, and sometimes people don't know what to say. Sometimes people say the entirely wrong thing with good intention. So what should people not say in a time like this?
They should not say, well, what did he do? Because with every police brutality situation, a lot of people always assume that the victim did something to cause his or her death. So don't say, okay, so he was killed, but what did he do? Or another thing I saw a lot was, yes, she's charged, but she's going to get off. Don't say that. No one is trying to hear that.
Yes.
Don't say, when the families file a civil suit because they want someone to pay for their loved one's death, don't say, oh, Black people always want money. Don't say that. There's a lot of things, like, people are really insensitive. So I've been raised to always put myself in the other person's position. So do that before you post something on social media, or before you say something to someone that can be deeply hurt by your statement.
Yeah. Allisa, I never met your brother, but I do remember you from school, just always having that calm personality, and so I could well imagine that your brother was a similar sort of person, never really trying to get into trouble or into anybody's way. And even when I see his picture, I mean, I look at his face and nothing but a good spirit radiates from him.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that you had to lose your brother in this way.
Thank you.
How should the world remember and honor Botham?
So I don't really like to think of Botham as, the past. Because, I mean, he was a constant in my life for 26 years.
Yes.
up to today, and that's something I do every single day. When I go into my living room, I have a picture of him. I'd always say good morning, because how do you stop speaking to someone you spoke to every day? So I say good morning, or if I walk past, I say, hey, what's up? Or I just say, I love you, or something. I speak to that picture. I want people to remember Botham as just God-fearing, loving, protective. I know they describe George Floyd as a gentle giant, but I remember my mom always, she used those terms to describe him. He was a gentle giant. I remember one time thinking, like, if he ever gets in a fight, what would he do? Because Botham has never been in a fight. I don't even think he knew how. He was always like a peacemaker. So that's why it kills me that Amber Guyger didn't ask him any questions, because if she did, they probably would have ended up being friends if she just asked him a question.
Yes.
So I want the world to remember him as just this angel.
Yeah. And what would Botham, what would he want in a time like this? What would he want to see happen?
I think Botham would be going for the same things as me. He would definitely want to see change.
Yeah.
He would, all of the previous police brutality situations, we would always speak about it. So he was always informed. I used to tease him, like, why would you watch CNN right before you go to sleep? But he always made sure that he was informed, and he would want peace. He definitely would want peace. But he would also want justice.
Yes. So to honor him best, we can all stand for justice. We can all stand for peace, and we can all stand for educating ourselves. And really, I think there's a lot that also needs to change beyond the laws, and going into how the color black is perceived, because I think that is the root of it. We refer to evil as darkness, as black, and we refer to everything pure and holy as white. So there's a lot from a social construct that is already working at a subconscious level for many people who are not in the right mind. And so it's definitely that re-education, and everyone playing their part in standing for justice, standing against even the jokingly, the joking racist jokes. I think we really have to put a cap on those things and really be more mindful in what we say, even when we're joking and with our friends in the privacy of our own homes, and just being and doing what is right at all times.
Agreed.
Allisa, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that a lot of our viewers here today, they have sent their thanks to you. They have sent their condolences. We will definitely, I do encourage everyone listening to go over. Allisa, you will share the link with me so I can also share here in the comments of the Sisters of the Movement. We want to be able to follow.
The Botham Jean Foundation. If you want to know more about Botham, and I started it to continue his legacy, you could go to the BothamJeanFoundation.org as well.
So that's BOTHAM JEAN.org.
Foundation.org. Yeah.
Foundation.org. So it's Botham Jean Foundation.org. I'll put that down in the comments for those of you who are interested in learning more. Right now, it is not the time for silence. It is not time to live in your fear of being judged. It is the time for us to all stand up, and wherever a petition or whatever it is that is circulating, that you can play your little part by placing a signature, by placing a comment of support. Let's stand together. And as Allisa said, vote, because your voice matters. It will make a difference. Thank you so much. And as always, everyone, let's do our part to stand for justice.
Thank you so much. All right.